we should be rolling. One of the important things whenever we are looking at a biblical passage, let me back up a moment, because we're going to come to the end of James either this Sunday or next Sunday. Where would you like to go after James? Anybody have any druthers?
I don't know.
You know.
How long do you figure you're going to be here?
Until God calls me home. But maybe not all of that right here. We don't know. We're working with a real estate agent at this particular point, and we'll list the house probably within the next week. I mean, it's listed. It'll go public. They, have a stager who comes in and says, move this out, move that over there, do this. And we're getting there. So I would say, it's going to take, I don't know how long to sell the house, and then closing. I imagine a couple months. We're still here.
Bruce and Carol are behind.
Where are you going?
Oh, okay. We, because of Bev's issues with breathing, and now she is on oxygen off and on 24/7. I mean, she builds up and then she's okay for a little while and then it goes down. So we discovered in a trip to Omaha that at low altitude she doesn't need oxygen. So we have decided that we are going to relocate, and we had decided a long time ago that if we had to move, it was going to be close to family, and that's either Southern California, Florida, or Omaha. And we're going to Omaha. So,
Probably see you there.
well, all right. So, I don't know, a couple months.
That makes a difference in whether we choose Mark or
Yes. Or Romans or Titus. So, that's interesting. What would I like to teach? One of the books that I really like and find challenging, but I don't know whether we'd get through it or not, is Revelation. All right, we'll start Revelation and see how far we go. Okay? All right, we'll see. Now then, back to my original question. Anytime we are approaching a text, it's always important to ask the question, what issue is being addressed? What is it? What message does God have for us? Because it's also for us. But what message does God have for the community where this issue is being addressed? And here's where I think inspiration comes in. What issue does the author perceive in that community that needs to be spoken to? Okay, does that make sense? And we have been in working with James. We know that the community has had a lot of Paul. The early church has had a lot of Paul, which Paul has just been emphatic about God's love and God's grace, and that it comes to us and we live it without having to earn it, right? That we, in essence, are very spatial, right? The question that I think is emerging in the early church then that is being addressed is that when we think we're spatial, rather than that giving us the security to be spatial in the lives of others, sometimes we just hold on to that for ourselves. And that spatialness can provide a sense that I'm better than you. or I don't have to engage with you because I'm special. I think that James, partially, that the inspiration here and the question that James is dealing with is how do we get people out of that? How do we get them to think beyond their specialness, to have the security to be able to share that with others? And we know, see, this is what's interesting about psychology. We developed the principles of psychology 2,000 years later, and yet there is something going on here where James understands that for us to get beyond ourselves, we've got to give to somebody. We have to interact with somebody. Paul understood that. You know, Paul says time and time again, you gotta give. You gotta live your life in somebody else. Jesus understood that. Jesus understood that very clearly, that you have to love your neighbor if you're going to experience love. Love is only academic until you love. And then you begin to understand what it means to be loved. Does that make sense? Okay. I think that's the dynamic that's going on here in James. I keep trying to figure out why does James seems to be so over here with regards to works righteousness. Not works righteousness. No, that's the wrong word. But the importance of living our faith in the lives of other people. Why is that so important? I think it's really important because that's how we grow. That's how we grow in our faith, is to do it in relationship to somebody else. Does that make sense? We're all God's children. We are all God's children. Okay? Okay, taking that understanding, let's then go back to James, and we're going to pick it up at verse 7 in chapter 4. Because we have to remember that James is also using the language of the day and that people will understand. Submit yourselves, therefore, to God. That's the bottom line. Is we're not, as I talked about in terms of that great story of Abraham and Isaac, where God then knows that Abraham knows the difference between the Creator and the created, between God and those of us who want to be God. We have to submit ourselves to God. We are the creature. We are the servant. Resist the devil, and in this situation, what is meant there is resist giving our allegiance to any other entity, which in the ancient world is characterized as the demonic or the devil. So that the dynamic, the tension is set here for James in this opening, or in this verse 7. If you resist the devil, he will flee from you. Okay, for a while, maybe. It's not permanent, and our submitting to God often is not permanent. You know, we do and we don't, we kind of, maybe, yeah, okay. That's kind of our journey through life. And so this dynamic is not hard and fast. It is fluid with regards to who we give our allegiance to. Does that make sense? Okay. Draw near to God. You know that the question is often posed, how do I find God? The question is, that's not the right question. The question is, how do I allow God to find me? You know, I just cringe, and I always have tried to debate that, or when someone says, I'm going to go find God, I got to find God. No, you don't have to find God. God's already there. We allow God to find us, because God's already part of who we are. There was a theologian, I don't remember his name, but talked about God as the hound of heaven. Do you know who that was? Kazantzakis? All right, good. Loved him. I remember some of his stuff. I just didn't know that was where that came from. But talks about it's a profound understanding that God is the hound of heaven, constantly seeking to find us. Never letting go of that. Pardon? Here I am. Or here am I. Draw near to God, open ourselves to God, and God will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands. What does that mean? What does it mean to cleanse your hands? This really shows us James's Jewish history and his rootedness. Because what is one of the aspects of the law? Purification. And purification was a hand-washing ritual. So it's not a legal thing about any longer that you have to wash your hands. What it means is to become purified. I mean, that's what it meant, to wash your hands the correct way, letting water run off your hands down this way so that whatever was on your hands came down off of your... I hate that when water's running down off my hands. Every time I even talk about that, it's just hard for me to imagine washing my hands that way, but I want to get them off this way. But that's the reason I'm unclean, probably. I wash my hands the wrong way.
Aren't you glad you have an elbow?
I am. Drip, drip. But that's what James means about this, is purification. Be purified. Be purified, you sinners, and purify your hearts. It's used right there. You double-minded. There we are. Sometimes we are giving our will to God. Sometimes we're not. Sometimes we submit. Sometimes we don't. We're double-minded. Lament and mourn and weep. Another term for that might be humble yourselves before the Lord. Let your laughter be turned into mourning and your joy into dejection. Now, I don't think that means that we ought not to be happy. I have read, there used to be preachers back in the 1900s who would say, man, if you smile, you're going to hell. Probably one of the greatest compliments I think I was ever given was by a lady who said to me, I am so grateful you taught us we could laugh in church. That's right. But, there is a place for real joy. But there's also not a place for arrogant happiness. Ha, 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 ha kind of stuff. And I think that's what James is talking about. That's right. He was extremely happy with great joy. So there is a place in our lives for joy. I would hope God gave it to us as a gift. But it needs to be authentic joy. Not a joy that comes out when I am laughing because look who I am better than you, or what I have received that's greater than yours. Does that make sense? And I think that's what James is talking about here. I don't think that he means that we ought never to experience joy or happiness in our lives. It's the spirit behind that. Whether it is one that's generated by a differentiation of me from you as a better person, or I have received something you haven't.
And if you truly live the way he teaches, how can you not enjoy it?
Great insight. Absolutely. Wow, that says it, because if we are living that life and have that confidence of God living through us, how could we not be joyful? Great. Just put one of those stars right on your forehead. I didn't get very many of those when I was in school, so. Let your laughter be turned into mourning, your joy into dejection. See, this whole thing is designed to help us to understand the distinction between God as creator and you and I as creature. And now he comes right back around to, we had the opening line. I mean, one of the things I love about Hebraic thought, which is really, James here is so powerful with regards to Hebraic thought. We come right back around with a parallel idea. This sentence started with an idea: humble yourself, submit yourself is where this starts, and then we had the data, and then he comes right back by repeating the thesis: humble yourself, submit yourself, humble yourself. Beautiful parallelism here. Circular thought. Yes. So, there's no doubt about the fact that James is whoever James is steeped in Judaic thought. Okay. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will exalt you. He will lift you up. My favorite passage is that one in Isaiah about the eagle. He will lift you up on eagle's wings. Yes.
Is it in a Jewish relation world, is a somber desirable? In other words, is he expecting us to come before the Lord all dejected and mourning with no joy? You're saying opposite, but is this a Jewish thought?
You remember Fiddler on the Roof?
No.
There's Tevye. I think what is very real here is the dynamic between authentic joy and joy that comes from the Spirit wanting to exalt itself. I don't know exactly how to say that. Or at the expense, or manipulating a situation, or
Enforcing my will.
to some degree of enforcing my will, or the false. I guess the false joy that comes with thinking I'm better than you.
Remember how Jesus said the thing about the guy standing on the street corner, the publican, saying, "Oh, thank you, God, that I'm not like other people."
There you go.
As the other person who went into the closet to pray in quietness.
Forgive me, Lord, I am a sinner.
Right.
I think there's more joy in the one who says, "Forgive me, Lord, I am a joy," that I'm a sinner, than the one who is saying, I just scored a touchdown. Yes.
Avoiding the pride of joy.
There it is. The pride of joy. Yeah, that's it. Is not letting the pride of joy get in the way of experiencing the authentic joy of God's Spirit living through us. Does that make sense? I think that gets it. Thanks, Gary. Great insight. Now then that we have set this, we get back to, again, it's so circular how it comes back now to employing this in our relationship with another. Do not speak evil against one another, brothers and sisters. Whoever speaks evil against another or judges another speaks evil against the law. Now, this is another interesting thing with regards to James digging into his Judaic heritage, because in this sense he understands the law in its authentic place, not as a legalism, but as a guide for life. Whoever speaks evil against the law and judges the law, but if you judge the law, you are not a doer of the law, but a judge, and there is one lawgiver. Do you see the parallelism thought here that goes right back to that paragraph that we used before? I mean, he's almost saying it the same thing. He's just saying it differently. He's really couching this now in Judaic thought about the law. The law did not come from you. The law came from God, and it was given so that we might have a harmonious relationship with one another. That's the purpose of the law. That's what Paul says, and that's what James is saying here. That the law was given so that those folks who were wandering in the desert, who had no idea how to relate to one another because they had been told how to relate to one another by the Egyptians, they get out in the desert and they are at loose ends. And so they are given the law so they know how to relate to God and they know how to relate to one another. It's not a way of earning their way to God. God's already there. He already took them out. The grace was already there. He came into their lives without them having done anything to deserve it. Now they're out in the desert. They don't know really how to organize society, because it had been organized for them for 400 years. And the way you work and relate to one another is do not kill, do not commit adultery, do not da-da-da-da-da-da. Okay? So, this is picking up on that same understanding of the purpose of the law is to promote a harmonious relationship among people. Then, there is one lawgiver and judge who is able to save and to destroy. So then, who then are you to judge your neighbor? Again, I think we need to kind of sort out what he's saying and what I'm not certain what I don't think he's saying. You and I do not have a right to judge whether Jim is loved by God or not. And we have no right to judge whether Jim is saved. That is his faith in God, period. I think that from the rest of the text, though, we can call into question Jim's behavior. And I mean, we do, no, I'm sorry. I think that it is imperative, and all the way through the teachings of Jesus and Paul, we do have a plumb line of behavior that is expected of us. And that is what we need to focus on. It's not whether that behavior separates us from God. There is no saying to Melba, you're going to hell. There is no saying that. Because that is not mine to say. And that's an extreme illustration. That is not mine to say. What I can say, you kind of spoke evil of your neighbor, Melba. You need to straighten that up. You did not feed the poor. You did not, because those are all things that are expected of us as Christians, the behavior. It's not to judge it in terms of you have broken your relationship with God, because the relationship with God that we have is faith, trusting that God loves us. But we don't always live that out very well. And that, I don't think James would have a hard time with saying that we can do. Does that make sense? Question?
Well, say for example, you were just reflecting the opportunity, the values that are there in the circumstance, or is it more of buying?
Yeah, I think that's the distinction. I don't want to get into the political season, but you know where I'm going with this. Anytime you demean another person or another group of persons, that needs to be stopped and called into account, because that is not consistent with any of the teachings in the Old or the New Testament. It is not consistent with the teachings of Jesus. If we are going to claim for ourselves the mantle of Christian, then we need to be Christian. And it has nothing to do with the issue of whether I have faith that God loves me. That's something else. It has to do with whether I'm living out the values of the Christian journey. And anytime I demean another person, that needs to be stopped. And Christians have an obligation to do that.
We couldn't have an election.
I think we could.
That would be interesting.
But we would have a whole different lead-up to the election.
Let's not talk politics.
Okay, let's not. Yeah, you're right. We don't want to do that. But
Do judge.
but it is important, I think, for Christians to make this discernment so that we can make those decisions in our daily walk.
Isn't discernment actually kind of a form of judging in a positive way? That's what I was getting when you were talking about being edifying. You know, we decide what is worth, we judge what we hear in a sermon or otherwise, and judge whether that is valid and that we want to learn from it, or whether we want to say, oh, you know. So we do make judgments, but I think that James must be just talking about the negative form of judgment in a way that demeans other people.
Like you said, I'm better than you.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of judgment.
That's judgment. And I think there are two dimensions here, from what you're saying. The first one is that it's imperative for us in our own prayer life and meditation to discern the values by which we live. It is imperative for us. I think that's one of the values and the importance of prayer and meditation, is to be thinking about and examining the values by which I live. But I also know that I am blind to the values by which I live. That's the reason I need you to say to me, are you really living those out? Say that louder.
To warn, comfort, and support.
To offer comfort and support and love in this challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the tough thing, is to challenge another person to grow and to do that in love.
Well, also it talks about don't speak evil against the law. And it's one of those things that we all deal with. Don't steal. Well, it was just a paper clip. Come on.
The office has plenty of them.
Those little judgmental, icky things that turn up,
Yeah.
And that's judging them. You're not a doer of the law, but a judge. Oh, put that paper clip back.
Well, Don, are we judging when we ask somebody to come to Sunday school class? Because I think we'll learn something. How do we know if they know it or not?
Well, I think what we do know is that we can all grow.
But how
I mean, at what point?
how do we know that he doesn't know that already?
By asking. Come and join us in a journey.
I don't think that's material, whether he knows it or not.
Whether he lives it. And another part, and I think, when we were talking about lunch today, and she was saying it's just a common meal. No, the specialness comes from the fact that we're together having a common meal. And the importance of being in study together is not that I may stand up here and say to you things you have known all of your life, but you may think about it differently. And that's what's important, is that we have the freedom among ourselves to discuss and to explore and to think about life differently. And we only do that, I think, ultimately in community. You know, I can spend days meditating. In fact, it was interesting when I was in Omaha and I would go out to the Crozier Brothers for a week retreat. But even there, I needed the spiritual director said, "You need an hour to share your meditations with me," and he reflected with me upon my journey. We all need each other to grow.
And ARP says you will grow older in youth if you are happy and you have a tribe. Isn't this a wonderful tribe?
It is. You know, and one of the things, the blessing and the curse of life, is that we are tribal, meaning that we all need a tribe. Or two or three. 12 tribes of Israel. The curse is when my tribe is better than your tribe. You know, that's a given. Well, I knew I'd never get there. Not the last word.
And that's the reason we have sports.
Yes. And some of us received humility this week. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go. Oh, this is really fun. Today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a town and spend a year there doing business and making money. Oh, this is going to be great. There's an opportunity. I mean, virtually what he's saying is we have seen an opportunity and we're going to take advantage of it. That's okay. You know, I mean, that's business. That's right. We're going to Omaha. We're going to take the tribe. Going to meet on Dodge Street. Yet you do not even know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? Again, what's the underlying message? You're not in charge. Need to be have this distinction between who's in charge. It's God. What is your life? Oh, this one's tough. What? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Wrong. Not me. You know, we're all, no, not me. I'm going to Omaha and make money. What do you mean? I don't think that's going to happen either. But what do you mean I'm a mist and then vanish? What's the message there? You're not God. You're not permanent. You're not God. Instead, this is what you ought to say. Is this not a judgmental statement? I mean, he just told us not to judge, and now what's he doing? So, to prove our point, or to illustrate our point, there is a place of judgment. Mainly warning, encouraging. Here's a way to be better. Here's a way to grow. Here's a way to enhance life. Okay? Instead, here's what you ought to say. Well, I'm waiting for the back row to speak up because he says this all the time. Okay, if the Lord wishes His will, there you got it. We will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance, and all such boasting is evil. Now go back to the opening statement. We will go. I'm going to do this. And what James is saying is, if the will of the Lord is, I will go and live for a period of time in this community.
And the creek don't rise.
And the creek don't rise. God willing, and the creek don't rise. Absolutely. Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. We will live and do this. As it is, you boast in your arrogance, and all such boasting is evil. Anyone then who knows the right thing to do and fails to do it commits sin. So when we know that which we need to do and don't do it, that's brokenness. Sin is what? Missing the mark. We've missed the mark. And I can't say this enough. This is this distinction which gets confused. Well, over here is God loves us and we receive that love or experience that love in faith. Period. On the other side then is here is how we are to live to experience the joy of life. Here is how we are to live in our relationship to one another. And all too often we confuse the two. We cross them over. We short circuit and say, if you don't live this way, God doesn't love you anymore. You know, that's not the story of the prodigal son nor the story of any of us who have children.
Well, that's also a real extended missile, so to speak, trying to get to the basis of doing it.
Okay?
This kind of leaves it up to us. Love God, love your neighbor.
That's right. What she says is that each one of these items of the, that goes beyond Torah, goes into Talmudic law, is trying to help us get it right. And there is no getting it right. Because regardless of whether you're going to cook green beans or not, you're not going to cook them the way I like them. You know? Because, you know, being a good Jew, you're not going to put pork in them, and my green beans have got to have a little ham in it. I'm sorry.
Paul certainly understood that issue when he said, you know, I don't do what I want to do.
Oh, yeah.
I mess up a lot. So forgiveness has to be a big part of this.
Absolutely.
I put that paper clip back.
Blessings upon you.
Well, you always keep them at the bank dry again. They do. And after so long a time, so many months or a year, I ask them if I can have some of those papers. I do.
Well, I'll bet they got a whole bunch of
They
them.
can spare them.
Well, next time you do that, tell them that you can have mine too.
Does that imply that if I don't know the right thing to do, that
I think so. I think that's the reason we have education. That's the reason we have class. You know,
once I learn that the right thing to do, then
once.
I know that don't know that it's the right thing.
There's civil law, too. Where does that come in?
Well, and that's a.
Shall not kill, you know, murder is not a good thing in civil law.
And a lot of civil law is built out of biblical tradition. You know, I think one of the things that we also separate out without thinking clearly about is the relationship of civil law to biblical law, or even the manifestation of government to biblical principles. You know, let's just take the debate that's taking place right now with regards to, Social Security. You know, Social Security was established back in the 30s to help with the middle class because families were having to take care of their parents and they weren't able to grow financially. And so the idea is that all of us collectively together could help alleviate that so that families who were struggling could move ahead. Now, that's a biblical principle. You know, I mean, we didn't say it came out of the Bible, but somebody knew their biblical principles when they were discussing that. Goodness and mercy. Our whole system with regards to welfare, with regards to all of its limitations and how it may get abused or not, That is a biblical principle. Care for the poor. How can you get any more clearer than that? Or the principle, those who have are to share. I mean, these are all biblical principles that have gotten worked into our governmental strain that we don't often recognize. You know, government's all bad. Well, no, it's not. There's bad parts to that, but there's bad parts in the church too. I mean, you know, let's... Well, I know, I came to preaching. I'll get off preaching. Let's get back to politics. It's more fun.
Find more wrong.
Yeah, that's right. We can do more judgment there. And we do. And it's 10:30. Okay, let's do this. Next time we will finish James, and we'll do introduction into Revelation. And see how that goes. All right. It will be fun, I hope. And we will see you all Saturday